Hi, I'm Christy, and welcome to our week 1 of Prayerful Flow for Advent. So if you haven't already, I encourage you to watch the introductory video to help you kind of know what to expect overall for the class and kind of prepare yourself for the series over the next 4 weeks. So to help you prepare for today's class, we are not going to spend a lot of time standing up or anything like that. So I really invite you to have something to help make the earth a little more comfortable. So we're going to be spending some more time in kind of closer to the floor. So something maybe to pad your knees, whether that's like a small pillow or if you have those kind of jelly pads or cushions, or I just have a really thin fleece blanket that I've rolled up, and you can use either to set it up so you're putting both knees on it or just one at a time. And then I also use it to help in a seated pose. So really that is it prop wise that might support you. If you of course have any props that you know you prefer to practice with, always feel free to use those as an option. So today our reading comes from the Gospel of Mark, and it is chapter 13, verses 33 through 37. So if you're following along with a Bible or with the website, the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, you can feel free to follow along, but otherwise I invite you to just simply listen. So to prepare for class today, we're going to begin class in a seated pose. So our first reading is really about being ready and watching. So sometimes we like to begin class on our backs, but being in a seated position will help us kind of be more alert and in a position of watching and being ready. So whatever being in a seated pose means to you, I invite you to kind of make your way there. And again, I did something to raise my hips a little bit higher than my knees, so I'm sitting on the blanket. So if that's an option for you, you always have also an option to sit up against a wall if you just feel like you need something to support your back. But just getting yourself into a seated posture that is going to be comfortable for you to kind of focus on your breath and listen to our Bible passage. We're actually going to be reading it twice this morning. So as you're settling into your space, I invite you to just notice how you feel. Do a quick check-in or body scan, seeing if you're carrying any kind of tension or gripping anywhere. Noticing if your mind is racing or your heart is racing, and just seeing if you can use your inhale and your exhale to begin to settle your body, mind, and spirit into the space. So taking a long inhale in, and maybe even bringing your arms up overhead as you do that. And then taking a slow exhale, maybe drawing your hands to heart center, bringing energy and peace and quiet and stillness inward. Maybe doing that a couple times if that helps kind of settle you and ground you in the space. And then begin to focus on your breath. So maybe noticing its temperature, if you're feeling cold or warmth in your breath. Noticing its rate and pace. Noticing if it's smooth and fluid or kind of slow and choppy. And maybe it helps you to count out the length of your exhale. So maybe you're counting to a slow count of 4 on your inhale, And a slow count of 4. On your exhale, maybe it helps you to place a hand on your belly and on your heart, noticing if your breath is really rising with your chest or more with your diaphragm. And seeing if you can deepen your breath by sending it all the way down to your belly so that your belly presses against your hand. And as you settle in for a few rounds of breath, noticing what your mind is doing as your body is slowing down, if it's telling you, I can't sit here, and just simply inviting it to be quiet and settle down. And then we invite God's loving presence into our space, knowing that God's presence and His love are always there and always here in our space, but it's us who are intentionally inviting and welcoming God into our prayer and our practice, into every breath we take, and kind of resting quietly with that for a few rounds of breath. We're going to prepare for our reading. As I said, our reading comes from Mark chapter 13. The first time we read, I invite you to simply listen. So see if you can continue keeping the pace of your breath. Notice if in your seated posture, if you've started to begin to slump over, notice if you need to switch positions with your legs. Keeping your spine long. Your gaze can be down or your eyes can be closed. I invite you to simply listen. Jesus said to His disciples, be watchful, be alert. You do not know when the time will come. It is like a man traveling abroad. He leaves home and places his servants in charge, each with his own work, and orders the gatekeeper to be on the watch. Watch, therefore. You do not know when the Lord of the house is coming, whether in the evening or at midnight, or at cockcrow, or in the morning. May He not come suddenly and find you sleeping. What I say to you, I say to all. Watch. Take a long inhale in. Maybe sigh your exhale out through your mouth or through your nose. This time I'm going to read the passage another time, and I invite you to notice any word or phrase that catches your attention. And notice if that word or phrase is something that brings you peace or consolation or kind of that movement of joy. Or notice if it's a word around which you're feeling resistance, or if it's a word or phrase that is challenging you. And if that's the case, I invite you to simply ask God to soften your heart around that, because especially during Advent season, that could be the Holy Spirit at work too, inviting you into deeper relationship, or maybe inviting you into something to let go of or surrender or lift up to God, because He wants that relationship with you, and it can be something that He's saying, hey, I don't want you handling this alone. I want you to come to me. I want you to depend on me and trust what I have to give. So take a long inhale in, slowly exhale, sitting in a place of being ready to receive, noticing any word or phrase. Jesus said to his disciples, "Be watchful, be alert. You do not know when the time will come. It is like a man traveling abroad. He leaves home and places his servants in charge, each with his own work, and orders the gatekeeper to be on the watch. Watch, therefore. You do not know when the Lord of the house is coming, whether in the evening, or at midnight, or at cock crow, or in the morning. May he not come suddenly and find you sleeping. What I say to you, I say to all. Watch." Take a few quiet rounds of breath to yourself, letting any word or phrase that came to you or that's coming to you now kind of settle. Maybe sealing it in as an intention for your prayer and practice today. And then as we begin to transition to some movement, I invite you to come to an easy seat if you're not there already. So just kind of sitting, what we would tell our young children, kind of sitting crisscross applesauce, or whichever way is comfortable. If you've been sitting in the same way for a while, if you just want to switch legs, or even take the opportunity to kind of shake your legs out before we transition back, or option to sit with legs extended if that feels right for you. So however your seat, wherever your seat is this morning, I invite you to extend your arms up overhead, maybe reaching your shoulders up, 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 before letting your shoulders rest gently where they belong on your back body, and then bringing your hands to heart center. Let's do that a few more times, just bringing in some gentle movement with our breath. Our inhale, our arms sweep up, and our exhale draws our hands back to heart center. One of the things that's difficult for Advent might be just finding stillness and noticing God in the small movements or the subtle places. So bringing that in mind, we just kind of watch and notice our small movements and the subtle changes in our body as we're practicing in more of a place of stillness. So I invite you to kind of just rest your hands on your thighs or your knees, and just sitting tall, letting your spine be long, feeling like there's a cord from the ceiling, kind of just drawing and lengthening your spine, drawing your chin in towards your chest, your gaze is down. And I invite you to begin to just do some gentle neck rolls with the pace of your own breath. So then just coming forward and letting our right ear begin to drop over our right shoulder, and pausing here maybe for a full round of breath before rolling our head kind of forward, letting the stretch come along just the length of the back of our necks, drawing our chin down towards our chest before drawing your left ear over your left shoulder. And just noticing what you notice. Maybe noticing one side is different from the other. Maybe kind of moving in a rhythm, so your inhale is when you're stretching towards the side. And as you begin your exhale, at the bottom of your exhale, your chin is towards your heart. And then the start of your inhale is when you begin to stretch over to the opposite side. And the next time you come back to center, pause to find stillness. Draw your gaze up, lifting your chin. Next, I invite you to place your hands on your knees and pushing into, using the palms of your hands to push into your knees, coming into a cow pose, a seated cow pose. So you're pressing into both palms, your arms begin to straighten, and your chest or your heart lifts, coming forward, and your gaze comes up as you inhale. So you're coming forward in your seated position. I'll turn a little bit, that helps kind of see. Turn right into the sun. So, and then on your exhale, begin to curl your spine, and you're pulling your navel towards your spine and pressing. This time you're pressing your spine away from you and curling your shoulders in more for a cat pose, and your gaze comes down, kind of looking towards either your belly or your feet. And then on your inhale, let's do that same lifting and opening. So you can begin to feel movement in your seated and your grounded pose as you're moving to the pace of your own breath for some seated cat-cow rotations. So again, really just some subtle movement with breath and noticing what you're noticing. If you're used to a very active practice or you're a very active, busy person, this might be really challenging for you. And again, I invite you to ask God to come into that place with you, because part of the discipline of uniting body, mind, and spirit is in the spirit, this tension, holding tension while waiting. After you've taken your next full round of breath, I invite you to just open your hands up once again to the sky, look forward, and then looking to the sky, then your exhale, joining hands, bringing them down to heart center. And then when you're ready, however you want to make your way there, we'll come to a kneeling pose. So this is where you may want to pad your knees if you prefer that. So just by simply coming to a kneeling posture, and your feet can be flat or your toes can be curled under, really just kind of a matter of preference for as you're kneeling. So coming up to a kneeling pose, I invite you to extend your arms first to the sky, drawing your shoulder blades on your back, keeping your hips in alignment with your knees. So noticing if you're tending to spill forward or kind of slouch backward, and just coming to some strong alignment. And just pausing here. And then on an inhale, look to the sky. Exhale, release your arms to the sides and draw your left leg out towards the short edge of your mat. So again, checking in for alignment. We're going to be coming back to this posture, so important to check for alignment. Looking to see if your heel and your ankle, so we're moving across this kind of side plane or the length of our mat, so your heel is actually in line with your right knee. So you don't want your leg too far out. You don't want it coming out behind you and being kind of awkward, messing with your balance. So to have stability in the pose, your left foot or heel is in a line with your right knee, and your right hip is stacked also over your right knee. Your hips are squared forward. So talked about gatekeeper in scripture, so of course we have to do some gate pose in our practice. So I invite you to, when you're ready, draw. So you're going to rotate your leg, drawing your foot to a flexed position, coming onto your left heel. And then exhale your left arm down your left leg, noticing where it lands. Maybe you're most comfortable with it above your knee. Maybe it's on your calf or shin. Maybe it's all the way down your ankle. Just kind of land in the place that's right for you. And then I invite you to open, extend your right arm over your head towards your left foot for a side body stretch. Maybe looking up toward your hand if that's not too much strain on your neck. Otherwise, your gaze is just forward. Noticing the stretch, noticing if your hip, your left hip is kind of sagging or collapsing, and just kind of drawing, using your breath to draw your energy upward and lift. So you're lifting and making space and then stretching. So on an inhale, extend both arms to the sky, plant your foot, pivoting it back towards forward, so your toes are facing the long edge of your mat. And then on an exhale, release your right arm towards next to your right knee, and then extending a long line of energy with your left hand. So coming into a modified side plank. And again, notice you're drawing that energy upward. So notice if you kind of started collapsing and bringing, putting some tension on your hip rather than creating space. So drawing your energy upward and extending long and really rooting into your left foot and feeling that stretch along your left side body. On an inhale, extend your arms to the sky. And then on an exhale, let's come back to our gate pose. So we're rotating our leg, popping up our left heel, our left toes, and stretching again towards our left foot. On an inhale, come back to center. Draw your left leg to meet your right. On an exhale, bring your toes together, sink your hips towards your heels, maybe bringing your knees wide and coming into a child's pose. Coming into child's pose, your forehead comes all the way down onto the mat. You're extending your arms. You can also bring your hands to prayer pose, the praying hands, Anjali Mudra, above your head. And if you're really tired of being kind of with your knees bent and you're feeling you need some length, instead of child's pose, you can also just come forward, maybe coming into a sphinx pose. So your forearms are extended out, your elbows are towards your rib cage, and your gaze is down your nose. So this is an option for resting if you're feeling like you really need to feel your legs long since we were kneeling for so long. So that's a good counter option. So then when you're ready, we'll make our way back up to coming onto our knees, so sitting on our heels and patting your knees as needed. And with yoga, what we do on one side, we need to do on the other side. So on an inhale, I invite you to extend, with using your breath, extend, lifting all the way up to a full kneeling pose. Exhale, bring your arms to the side, extending your right leg out, and again, checking in on alignment. So my leg happened to land a little bit far behind, so to stay in the same plane, you're having your heel in alignment with your right heel in alignment with your left hip. And again, squaring our hips to the front, making sure we're not like spilling forward, coming back, or awkward. Inhale, extend, and then our arms are to the side. We look towards our right leg, rotating, flexing our right foot, popping up our right toes, and then reaching, noticing if your right hand lands at a different place on your leg than where your left hand did, and then reaching your left arm overhead towards your right foot. And just taking a few rounds of breath here. Inhale your arms to the sky. Return your toes to the mat, pivoting your foot so that it's parallel to the short edge of your mat. And then exhale your left hand down towards the mat, reaching for a modified side plank. Long line of energy, really root your right foot into the mat. Feeling from the tips of your toes to the tips of your right fingers, really lengthening, making space, being a watchful gatekeeper. On an inhale, let's return back to our gate pose. So we pivot our foot, toes come up, and extending the stretch to the opposite side. Notice what you notice. On an inhale, extend back to center. Draw your right leg in to meet your left. Exhale your hands through heart center, folding, returning back to your seat on your heels. And then coming into whichever extension pose you need. So whether that's a puppy dog pose, a child's pose, or coming into a sphinx pose. And if you're coming into a sphinx pose, always an option to, if you can see, bend your knees and maybe take some movement. So just finding ways that if you are a person who needs a little more movement, maybe just this is a scaffold or a help to give you some more wiggling or release of energy during these postures where we're kind of holding space and taking longer moments of breathing. And then when you're ready, find stillness. And we're coming back to our kneeling posture. First, coming onto our knees, using our arms, extending with our inhale, rising to a full kneeling pose, exhaling our hands wide, extending our left leg, coming into our gate pose, popping up our toes, stretching to the side, inhaling, exhaling, returning to the opposite side, landing our right hand on the mat, coming into a modified side plank, returning, really rooting your left foot into the mat, and then from here, I invite you to, whether you're on fingertips or planting your hand, I invite you to extend your left arm to the sky. So you're drawing energy from across your chest, spreading from your right hand to your left hand, and then begin to lift your left leg. So really lifting it straight up, coming into a kneeling half moon pose. It's really sending energy through your left foot, keeping your left foot flexed. And if this is, again, really challenging for you, your space, your bus stop, so to speak, might be just to lift your foot a couple inches off the floor and then play with building heat and range of motion to extend your leg. And then wherever you are in your half moon pose, slowly returning your left leg to the mat, using your core to draw yourself back up to a kneeling pose, and then popping your left toes up and just coming to gate pose one more time. Inhaling, hands to the sky, drawing your left leg in to meet your right. Exhale, coming to child's pose, puppy dog, or sphinx pose, or some combination of the three. It's your practice and your prayer. And just kind of checking in and noticing what you feel, maybe checking in on what your expectations were. You know, sometimes in a typical yoga practice, we're doing some standing and some downward facing dog and some more flowing in a different way, or using our mat and using our space in a different way. And if you're feeling frustrated by being lowered to the ground or not moving in the way you expected to, maybe turning that over in prayer as a theme for Advent. Sometimes it's waiting and just surrendering to the waiting and knowing and trusting that God will give us what we need. And that is sometimes very different from what we want or what we think we want. So from whatever posture you're in, coming back up, making your way into a kneeling pose with your sit bones against your heels. Inhaling your hands to the sky, drawing them to heart center. Pausing here, preparing, engaging your core, and then your inhale, drawing your energy, coming up to a full kneeling pose, extending your arms to the sky, exhaling them out to the side, drawing your right leg out to the side, checking your alignment, then pivoting onto your right heel, popping your right toes up, and then you know where we're going. Gate pose. Inhale your arms to the sky. Pivot your foot, returning, planting your right foot onto the earth, lowering your left hand to your side, coming into a modified side plank, enjoying the stretch, noticing what has changed since we've begun practicing, or since your first time in this posture. And then preparing for our half moon by first drawing a line from the bottom of our left hand across our chest, opening up our right hand to the sky, and then lifting, making space on your hips, so stacking your hip over your knee and beginning to draw your right leg towards the ceiling, coming into a kneeling half moon pose. With our theme of Advent, the moon is the light in the dark sky, just as God is our light during a time of darkness. The mystery of the Incarnation. So wherever your right leg is in space, begin to lower, planting your right foot back on the mat with the strength of your core and your inhale, drawing your arms parallel, extending out to the sides, popping your right toes up, coming back to gate pose one more time. Your version of gate pose, whatever that is. On an inhale, come back to center, returning your right leg, your right knee to meet your left, and exhaling, coming down to whichever resting pose you choose to take. Maybe coming back to your word or phrase that you perhaps set as an intention for your prayer and practice this morning. And just checking in and notice what you notice. Using your resting pose, whichever posture you're in, as a place to check in rather than tune out. And then when you're ready, we will meet in hands and knees. Coming into neutral tabletop pose. You can stay right where you are. I am just going to turn to the side for instruction purposes. But just checking in, your hips over your knees, shoulders over your wrists. And then let's take some traditional cat-cow rotations just for something familiar, something different, bringing movement in a different plane on our mats. So on your inhale, your heart draws forward, hands are pressing into the mat, gaze is up. And then on an exhale, you begin to curl your spine, your tailbone drops towards the mat, releasing your head and your neck, using your hands to push your spine towards the ceiling. Maybe even shaking your head out, yes and no. And then inhaling, returning to cow pose. And then using the pace of your own breath to take whatever opportunities for movements you need. Maybe even pressing away, getting a low back stretch by bringing your sits bones towards your heels. And then when you're ready, finding stillness, we'll return back to our kneeling pose. And then we'll take that same flow through, putting it all together, this time with a little more movement. So on an inhale, breath draws us to a full kneeling pose. Our exhale, our hands come to the side, our left leg draws out. Inhale, lifting, flexing foot, left toes come up. Right arm reaches over. Inhale back to center, planting your left foot. Exhale, right hand comes to the mat, extending out for a modified side angle, modified side plank. And then inhale, lifts our leg, coming into kneeling half moon. And if you're good here, you can feel free to stay here or continue working on lifting your leg. Also an option to extend your heel, your left heel, towards your sits bones and maybe reaching back towards your foot if you have the bandwidth for a quad stretch. But otherwise, if you're good in half moon, you're good in half moon. Take a full round of breath here. On an inhale, begin to lower your left leg to the mat. Extending your arms to the sky. And then exhale, returning back to gate pose. Inhale, back to center, drawing your left knee to meet your right. Exhale for puppy dog, or child's pose. Pausing here for a moment. Inhale, returning, exhale probably, returning your sits bones to your heels, and then inhale back up to a kneeling pose. Exhale, arms extend. Right leg pops out. Right foot flexes, toes come up. Coming into gate pose. The faster the flow goes, the harder it is for the words to come out, and the right inhale and exhale. So if you're still breathing and moving with us, you know what you're doing. Inhale back to center, planting your foot. Exhale, modified side plank. Inhale, finding half moon. Option to take the bind with the quad stretch. Noticing if you have more bandwidth on this side. Any kind of wobbling in either balancing option is completely okay. Your exhale, return back to side plank. Inhale, returns your arms to your sides, extending out. Coming back to one final gate pose. Inhaling back to center, drawing your right knee in. Exhaling to the resting pose of your choice. And on an inhale, begin to draw yourselves back up, coming to a seated pose on the mat with your legs out in front of you. Pulling away any flesh from your sits bones or coming onto seated on a block or a blanket or any kind of prop pillow if you need your hips raised up from the earth. Keeping a slight bend to your knees. Inhale your arms to the sky. Exhale your arms forward, letting your hands land where they may. The goal isn't necessarily to grab your feet, but to just draw your heart forward and feel a hamstring stretch. Your gaze is down. Remembering to breathe and just noticing how it feels to be back in a seated posture, and kind of moving in this direction rather than from side to side. On an inhale, begin to unwind the pose, extending your hands to the sky. And on an exhale, return your hands to heart center. And then begin to spread your legs in a V, coming into your version of splits. Again, it can be here if that's where you feel tension and stretch. It shouldn't be anything that you're trying to force your body into. It should feel like that just right spot, that sweet spot where you're just getting a nice, comfortable stretch in a place where you can continue to move and breathe in. So you're not gripping or tightening, or you shouldn't feel any kind of pinching or acute pain, because that's not yoga. So on an inhale, extend your arms to the sky, look to the sky, rotate your heart towards your right knee, and then begin to fold over your right leg. So letting your hands again land where they may, and then option maybe to even use your left arm and place it on the outside of your right leg, kind of getting a gentle twist in. Bringing some stretch to deepening the stretch in your hamstring or even your IT band. Noticing if your left hip is tending to pop up and come with you, and just kind of inviting it to stay rooted on your mat. Just as gracefully as you came into the pose, begin to walk your spine back up to neutral. Extend your arms to the sky. First, come back to center. Inhale to twist over your left leg. Exhale, your heart over your left leg, coming towards your left knee, letting your hands land where is comfortable. And again, not creating too much tension. And then of course, option to place your right hand on the outside of your left leg, maybe if you like or prefer that gentle twist. And same thing, keeping your right hip anchored into the mat so that your weight is across both sits bones, right and left side. On an inhale, extend your arms to the sky, turn back to center, drawing your legs back together, bring the soles of your feet together. So your knees come out wide, soles of your feet together. And then on an inhale, extend your arms to the sky. Lead with your heart to fold over your legs towards your feet, maybe coming all the way down. Maybe your elbows are on your knees and your hands are wrapped around your feet. Just folding over, coming inward. Breathing as we begin to settle and close our practice. On an inhale, begin to walk your hands up your legs to come out of the pose. Bring your knees together, and then let's turn and come all the way onto our backs. However you want to get there, and extending long on your back. Like, wow, I haven't been in this total place of letting letting gravity just take us to the ground, our whole body weight resting on the mat in this place of surrender and letting go. On an inhale, extend your arms up overhead, just taking a full body stretch from the tips of your fingers to the tips of your toes, feeling like really just symmetrical and balanced in this long, extending full body pose, where both arms and both legs are doing the same thing, and we're just extending long, kind of a counter pose to our full little gate side plank kneeling flow that we've done. And then inhale, begin to bring your knees to your chest, wrapping your arms around your knees, and then maybe gently rolling from side to side, or right, back, forward and back. If that feels right to you, maybe even just making some hip circles with your knees. If there's one more posture you'd like to take before we come into our final resting pose, you have the option to do that now, whether that's a bridge pose or a happy baby pose if that's in your practice. Otherwise, begin to prepare yourself for your Shavasana. So maybe that's just for you resting on the mat. Maybe that's putting kind of a bolster or pillow or blanket or prop underneath your knees if you prefer your feet on the ground and your knees bent. Or maybe even just grounding by placing a blanket over your hips if that feels right for you. So just coming into a place of receiving, your arms resting to your sides, maybe your palms are open, or maybe you have one hand on your heart and one hand on your belly as you begin to focus on your breath. I'm gonna read the passage one more time, and this time I invite you to simply listen, bringing to mind either your word or phrase that came to you before, your intention, or any new word or phrase that catches your attention, and this time simply offering them up in prayer to God, whether that's a prayer of petition, a prayer of gratitude, a prayer of praise, a praise of sorrow, or prayer of sorrow, whatever is on your heart. Simply surrender and lift that up to God. Jesus said to his disciples, "Be watchful, be alert. You do not know when the time will come. It is like a man traveling abroad. He leaves home and places his servants in charge, each with his own work, and orders the gatekeeper to be on the watch. Watch, therefore. You do not know when the Lord of the house is coming, whether in the evening, or at midnight, or at cockcrow, or in the morning. May he not come suddenly and find you sleeping. What I say to you, I say to all. Watch." feel free to simply extend your Shavasana by pausing the video. If you're ready to move forward with us, feel free to bring your awareness back to your breath. Begin making small movements with your hands and feet, and your fingers and toes. Maybe taking another full body stretch, or hugging in your knees to chest. Taking whatever time or movement you need before turning to one side, whichever you prefer. Resting, kind of curled up, savoring a few more moments of the embrace of God's loving presence in your prayer and yoga practice. And when you're ready, begin to use the strength of your arm and legs to will yourself back up to a seated position on the mat. Slowly inhaling your arms up overhead, and exhaling your hands to heart center. Your eyes can remain closed or your gaze can be down. We draw our hands to our foreheads. May God's word be on our mind. We lower our hands to our lips. May God's word be on our lips. And we return our hands to heart center. May God's word be in our hearts. I will continue to pray for you as you prayerfully deepen your relationship with God through this season of Advent. We extend love and light to our family, our friends, our loved ones, and even those we may not feel so much love for this Advent season, knowing that God's love is unconditional and inclusive of everyone. Our prayer and our practice is complete for Advent Week 1. We bow to our God and one another as we say, Namaste.